All right, welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, Alex Howell, and today we had back on from episode 6, Kory Gallagher, and Kory is currently the U.S. Social Science freshman class co-dean Weathercock Instructor for the Barstow School, which is one of the oldest private schools in the Kansas City area. He has been an instructor at several private high schools in the Kansas City area, as well as some universities. He is currently completing his PhD in American Cultural History from the University of Missouri in Columbia. And again, as with last episode, we don't get quite as crazy with this one, but there is a little bit of friendly banter back and forth, but that was kept at a minimum this time. We had a great conversation again. I sent Kory a message a couple of weeks ago and said I'd like to debate with you some different things, but especially whether or not Thomas Jefferson was the a-hole that I kind of made him sound like in the last episode, and we had a few other things to discuss as well. Again, great episode. Kory's a great friend of mine. He's amazing to listen to, and he is without question a guy that you can just go sit down, have a drink with, ask him a single question, and he will carry your conversation from there. So I hope you guys enjoy and have a great week. Thanks. Bye. All right, cool. We're on. After
Cool.
that fun conversation.
Yeah, we should have
All right.
recorded that.
Yep, just to make sure you go back to Pittsburgh, boys and girls. That's where you want to be. That's where all the fun times happen.
I don't know about that.
So, I asked you this at the get together at the lake the other day, but how is it to have your summer off and to go like 20 different places in the summer?
Man, it was pretty epic.
Yeah.
Expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been really, really nice to have the
Awesome.
summer off and just sort of sit around and, work on a couple projects and get some yard work done and, go visit a couple different places. So it's been pretty sweet.
I like how you threw the yard work in there. Like, yeah, just got a really boring life. Just nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing much going on with me.
Just a crazy Saturday, Might go to Bed Bath & Beyond.
Absolutely. What? So when I sent you the message about coming on the podcast, I had like 5 different things.
Oh, right.
I don't want to deal with the first one yet because
You haven't had enough beer.
I haven't had enough beer and I'll start getting lippy. But there was one. Oh yeah, how fucking awesome was Teddy Roosevelt?
Oh yeah.
That was when I read that. Which, by the way, thank you for recommending that. But when
Yeah.
I read that series of books, it was just like, that's one of my favorite people now.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
completely, totally insane. But,
Totally insane.
yeah, I think the story I always tell just to kind of describe him, because he's so hard to describe, because, like, in 60 years, he put in what it took, like, most people would get in, like, 4 lifetimes.
Sure.
But it's just the day that he decided, like, yeah, that's the Matterhorn, I'm going to go climb it.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Well, like my favorite is the day that his wife died in childbirth and his mother died on the same day.
Yeah.
And when he had found out that they were both dead, he gave himself 10 minutes to cry. And he went in his room and he cried for 10 minutes, and then he packed up his bags, and that's when he went out west.
Yeah.
Because he felt like his reaction to that was too emotional. his manliness was in question by him. So he decided that he needed to go and really prove to himself that he was in fact a man. And that's when he became a cowboy. Yeah. Which is interesting, because this is, of course, one of these moments that's sort of, when it comes to Roosevelt, it's sort of celebrated. There's this guy facing personal tragedy, and he's going to go help tame the West.
Yeah.
Right? But nobody ever asks, I've often wondered, nobody ever says, like, what about the kid? Because the kid didn't die in childbirth, so he just leaves this kid behind. And I think he had other kids at that point, too.
I think he just had the one at that time.
Or
Didn't
was
he?
it just
Yeah.
the one? Yeah, I can't remember. But it's like, what did you just like, hey, Aunt June, watch my kid.
Yeah, I got 90% of the inheritance from our dad,
What?
so here's some money. Take
right,
care of my
here's
child.
some money. Take care of my kid. Yeah, it's so,
Yeah. Do you think it's even possible to do something like that right now? Like just to
No.
pack up and head out west? Because, I mean, the thing that is surprising to me is like he did have enough of an inheritance from his father
Mm-hmm.
to go out west and buy land and buy a house
Right.
and
Buy cattle.
and invest out there. I mean, he was a shitty investor.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Brilliant politician,
Absolutely.
terrible investor.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good question in and of itself because, it's funny actually because like literally just before this
Mm-hmm.
or just after this, I think he does this in like 1880
Mm-hmm.
and in 1894, I want to say it is, 92, 93, 94, somewhere right around there. At the same time that there's the Chicago World's Fair that's happening in Chicago, obviously. The American Historical Association holds their annual conference, and they hold it in Chicago, sort of in conjunction with the World's Fair. And, normally these things are like totally pointless and ridiculous. And anybody who's ever been to a historian's conference knows that we're not talking about the most interesting stuff ever. But at this particular one, something really interesting happens, which is that a historian gives a paper there, which, by the way, is still like the way that we do it today. Like if you go to a history conference, you like literally read a paper out loud to the people who are watching, which is very awkward to just read out loud for a half hour.
Yeah.
But anyways, so Frederick Jackson Turner, who's the first real American historian, he's like almost completely trained in America, which is unheard of at that point. Anyways, he gives this paper, and basically what he's trying to do is explain what makes America unique. And what prompts this is that in 1890, the federal government undertook the census, and the results start coming out around 1892. And one of the results of that census is that there is no longer any unbroken line of frontier.
Oh, interesting.
So there are places that are wild,
Yeah,
right? There are
right.
places that are uninhabited, uninhabited, quote unquote, which means no white people live here.
Yeah.
And there are still dangerous, wild places, right? But you can no longer look at a map and draw a line and say, this side's the frontier and this side isn't.
Oh.
And so that prompts Frederick Jackson Turner to sort of go on this historical exploration of the importance of the frontier in American life and to American culture. And basically the argument that he makes is that it's so central to what America is and how American culture has developed that we're actually pretty screwed, that America is going to start to falter as a country, as a nation, as a culture, because no longer will we be able to have that experience. And that gets used in all sorts of weird ways, right? To, propel, a brief moment of American imperialism in the traditional way in the 1890s and 1900. But there is something in that I think is sort of fundamentally true if you can boil out the racist aspect of it, right? Which is that we are sort of struggling, I think, in the modern world. And this is something Roosevelt talked about, right? And I don't actually know that we've resolved this conflict, where it's sort of difficult for men to perform masculinity, especially when we're talking about in a non-toxic way.
Right.
Right. So like that idea of, I'm really emotionally upset, I'm going to move out to the West, I'm going to start a cattle ranch, I'm going to prove that I'm a man by being in this wild, dangerous place and making something of myself. Where do you go today for that? And really, when he did it, even it was sort of iffy as to where you went, because that line of frontier had already closed,
right?
Even though people didn't quite realize it. Yeah. So he goes to, I can't remember, one of the Dakotas.
No, I thought it was north, but maybe not.
Might be north, might be, I don't know. Yeah. Is it really
like
a
the edge of the Badlands or something?
Right.
Like that?
Yeah, he's in the middle of nowhere, right? And he goes and has this experience, right? But where do you have that today?
And for the length of time that he does, I mean, he's out there for a long time.
Yeah, about 10 years, was it?
Something like that.
8 to 10 years?
Yeah. Because, I mean, I know he was back and forth a bit, but, I mean, he went right back out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to me, it was just amazing because, it is amazing to think that he was out there for that long. And, you see, one of the guys that I follow on Instagram is Cam Haynes. He's a bow hunter.
Oh, okay, sure.
And so he'll go out into Montana or, areas in Canada or, Wyoming, wherever he can find an animal to shoot and kill.
Yeah,
But he really, he's kind of known for hunting elk. And so he'll go and he, will chase these elk up mountains and camp out. And, they take food in, but then they have to, basically once they kill the animal, they have to take all the meat out there because they're not carrying the thing out. And they drag it back to their coolers. But at the same time, you think about it, it's like you could go several miles in, but you're coming back out. You're not living out there.
No.
You're there for a week, maybe 2. I mean, the closest thing I can think of to that, and it's not comparable, but is the Appalachian Trail. Mm-hmm. You go 6 months.
Right.
You're on the Appalachian Trail for 6 months. It starts in Georgia, ends in Maine, and you camp out and you have food and that kind of thing. But even along the trail, there are stops.
Right.
There's a place halfway through because you have to buy new shoes every time. It's true. Your shoes will wear out from walking every single day.
Sure.
So, but you think about that, it's that's really the only thing. And even at that point, that's still a finite amount of time.
Right.
You're probably not pulling to the side and throwing up a shack.
No, you're not living out there unless you're just giving up on the walking part. You might seem like a good idea halfway through.
Yeah, which would probably be me after 3 days. Dude, no.
No, forget that. I'm going to build a shack.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's honestly the only thing I can think of. And like you said, I mean, I'm sure there are areas.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go down to the Amazon and enjoy that experience.
Right. And there still are areas in America, you think some of the Moab.
Yeah.
Moab.
Moab,
you can go down there and be in the middle, but you're on federal land. You can't live there.
Right.
And I mean, certainly there are places where it's, where there is real wilderness.
Yeah.
That you could go and live. But I think that idea of, I'm going to go to the West and show how big of a man I am has really kind of largely been lost.
Do you feel like it's kind of progressed even more quickly with so many jobs being internet based?
Well, and the ironic thing is about that question is that was the thing that all these guys were revolting against in the 1880s. So, if you go back a generation before them, their dads primarily owned their own businesses. Even when you see industrialization start, it really is small factories, right? So where one dude would be in charge.
Right.
But by the time you get to 1885, we're starting to talk about really super complex conglomerates of corporations. And now the idea that you would actually be in charge is insane.
Yeah.
Even the guy in charge really isn't in charge. And when you talk about really complex organizations, right? So in the 1880s and 1890s, you have men like Roosevelt who are feeling this, they call it a crisis of masculinity. Yeah. And a lot of that is directly related to the fact that they had lost some economic freedom, that they were no longer able to call their own shots, that idea of being able to carve out your own space and economic stability in America had really become reliant on your ability to integrate into the corporate system.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We just keep feeling new versions of that, Silicon Valley, for example.
Yeah. Silicon Valley is one of the most interesting places in the world to me because of, one, access to capital is incredible. Mm-hmm. I know that we just totally took a left turn, but when I was trying to get as involved as I could be in just learning and understanding Kansas City's tech revolution.
Sure.
I was amazed at some of the people that would speak, and they would talk about being in California. They talk about being in Silicon Valley. And of course rent's high. Of course property values are high. I can go to Silicon Valley, and if I have an idea, I can get money. Mm-hmm. Here, you can't do that. No. I mean, it's nothing like that. You have to have a proven business model, and most of the time you have to be past income.
Right.
In order to even be looked at. We're out there, it's hey, I've got this idea for a widget. Okay, here's some money to build it, but I own a significant portion of this now.
Right.
And it's an amazing thing because whenever I think about something like that, I normally think New York, access to capital because that's where it's such a major banking center and trade center. Silicon Valley's taken that over, and it's internet based, so it's worldwide. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible, and it is interesting. Some of the companies that have started there, raised money there, and then moved to other places.
Yeah.
Like that's also kind of an interesting phenomenon. It's not, large scale or anything,
Right.
but it is sort of interesting the way that has happened. But
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right. The amount of money that gets floated around in Silicon Valley is insane. And in a lot of ways, if you think about it, sort of like Marx's big criticism of capitalism was that you can make money by doing nothing.
Yeah.
By simply owning real estate or investing money, you can make more money. And that just creates a circular problem in which the people at the bottom are never able to get access to that and always remain at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's taken one more leap where it's not even something tangible.
Yeah.
Right? It's not money that you invested. I mean, it is, but it's not rent. It's not property. Right. It's literally something that exists on a computer and a computer only. I mean, it's zeros and ones.
Yeah.
That people have been able to transfer into millions of dollars.
Well,
billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah. Well, and the biggest one that I think about, because it happened like right as I was getting into that, but I remember, and it obviously was a great investment, but I remember when Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion.
Yeah, that's insane.
I was just like, it was 10 people in a program, and now they have $1 billion.
And like, I don't get it. I think this is probably like a sign that I'm getting old. Like, I have an Instagram account. I don't think I ever really look at it or do anything with it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't. You post pictures.
Yeah.
Like, how is that worth $1 billion?
I know.
That's insane.
Yeah, I know.
I don't get it.
Well, and it's grown up so much since then. I mean, it's probably 30 times, at this point, what they bought it for. But they also had the capabilities of Facebook and
right.
Instagram. It would have been really tough to scale that model without Facebook.
Sure.
But just the complete and total integration, I really feel like today our society is, I mean, like the term fake news gets thrown around so much right now that it's annoying. But our society really does seem to be like just fake.
Yeah,
it's
completely.
Because it's online, you can show that it's anything.
Right.
And so, when somebody gives real value, it's almost like, really? Are you? Is this real? Because nobody else is telling me the truth. I saw something the other day. It was like some like millionaire or billionaire, whatever he is, has a private jet. And when it's sitting like at whatever airport he's near, whatever airport he's in, he will basically rent it out for significant money, but not private jet money, but he'll rent it out to people for like 5 minutes to go in there and take pictures so that they can put it on their Instagram account like they're on a private jet.
Yeah, that's insane.
Isn't that weird?
That is so weird.
It's like because we have so little communication with our fellow humans, we actually now feel like we have to show them that we're better. We have to show them that our lifestyle is grand, even when it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, all the studies that have been done about like how social media impacts you. Yeah. Like apparently, like I remember one I saw where it said if you're actively posting, right, then social media becomes positive for your mental health. Yeah. If all you do is scroll and observe, then it's a negative. Because all you do is focus on the things that you don't have and how other people's lives are better than yours. Yeah. But that's, think of that's dangerous. Yeah.
You're sitting alone looking at people who you think have more than you, and most of them probably don't. Right. I mean, some of the richest, like I think about somebody like Chris Pratt posts pictures of like him cutting down trees. It's like because he doesn't have to.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Got to keep up that workout routine.
Exactly. Otherwise. But if you see another, 22-year-old or even another, 17-year-old that's, looks like they're in a private jet, but they just paid somebody, $50 to sit in it.
Which is insane.
Yeah. But, if you see that, though, I can see where if you're scrolling, you're just like, why don't I have
a private jet?
Yeah. This is awful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's it's a real danger to our culture. Yeah. It's funny. I always think of whenever I see the Kardashians. Yep. I think of in Renaissance Italy, a number of the city-states passed laws against the purchasing of luxury. So basically, they capped the amount of luxury goods that you could consume each year, so that this actually didn't become a problem. So the class difference was not so completely evident. Yeah. In your house and the things that you wore. And breaking those laws would get you burned at the stake.
Oh shit.
Because it was that serious.
Yeah.
You know. And that's kind of where, you know, you think about the Kardashians, for example, who are
They would have been burned years
They
ago.
would have been burned years and years and years ago. You know, who've basically been able to create this image of extreme wealth,
Mm-hmm.
which they now have. But when they created that image, they did not have. You know, they certainly were wealthy. They were well off.
Yeah.
But they were not anything like what they are now.
No.
And they've made all this money now by peddling access to that lifestyle through these different brands that they've created.
Yeah.
And the fact that people will actually buy this shit
Yeah.
is completely insane to me.
Well, especially like Kanye's white T-shirt that was $400. Like, I'm happy that you spent $400
Sure.
on that because you're an idiot.
Right.
It's a white T-shirt. Like, it's nothing special. But I won't say who I was telling this to the other day, but we were, for some reason that got brought up, the Kardashians and their whole situation.
Yeah.
And I, honest to God, like, this is being serious. I think Ray J needs a cut of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. Ray J is the one who made that all happen. Right? Like, never has anybody ever made more money from not doing sex well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've ever actually seen
No,
the video.
I've never seen it.
But yeah,
I've seen it.
let me just put it this way: Ray J is definitely doing all the work. A certain somebody is just laying there,
and he got screwed.
he got
because
totally
now
screwed.
he has zero Kardashian money, even though he
That's-
fucking caused the whole thing.
That's right.
That drives me. Like, it's a hilarious argument, but if I was on the jury and he came through and was like, no, I get a 5% cut
Yeah,
of all this
something.
shit, I'd be like, yeah, he does.
Yeah.
I would have never, like, I mean, you knew of them. I mean, obviously everybody knew Bruce Jenner, but like,
Yeah.
I would
Well-
never call them a family. I mean, I know Kardashian was on the OJ.
Yeah, I mean,
trial too, but-
Kardashian was like a known person,
Yeah, but nobody
largely
knew Kim.
because of the OJ trial. Right?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the picture of their family, like, before enhancement?
Oh yeah,
It's
Yeah.
weird.
it's real weird.
Yeah.
It's
Like,
real
oh,
weird.
okay.
Yeah.
Like, I have zero issue with people doing whatever they want to their body to feel
Sure.
better, as long as it's not so far that it's more of a mental illness
Right,
than anything
right.
else. But, man, they look way different.
Yeah.
Yeah. The youngest one is the strangest transformation because she looks like a completely different person.
Yeah, it's really weird, and it's not. You know, I mean, they have an economic goal in mind, and I don't want to criticize them for
No.
chasing the dream.
Exactly.
But my God, the things people will do to get what they want
Yeah.
is pretty crazy. Yeah.
One thing I do kind of respect about it is they don't ever admit surgery or anything like that. I don't think they say anything about it because
No,
they
I don't
can't.
think they do either.
They can't say no because obviously they have.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, it just cracks me up when I hear somebody that's just like, "Yeah, I wish we could do that." It's like, you remember how this started? Like, I've listened to like interviews with like Gary Vaynerchuk or Gary V, and like he's had people that have like called in or sent letters, emails, whatever, been like, "I just don't know why I don't have as much success as Kylie Jenner." It's like, I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
One, Ray J.
Let's go back to a sex tape.
Yeah. And
From
two, their mom
odds.
is a freaking
Nut
ninja.
job.
Yeah. Well, she's a nut job, but she's good at what she
Yeah.
does.
Yeah,
She knows how to make money.
Yeah, she does. That
Yeah.
is for sure.
Yeah.
That is for sure.
I
Yeah,
li-
it's
I like that. Was it Kylie, the youngest one, that they came out and said that she was going to be the youngest self-made billionaire? Like,
yeah.
self-made?
Oh,
What?
yeah. Self-made.
Uh-huh.
Sure.
Wow, Forbes. I think it was Forbes. Don't quote me on that. It's
Yeah.
like, really?
It's like-
Self-made?
Trump talking about the small loan he got from his
Yeah.
dad. It was $14 million, but that's cool, man. You're
Yeah.
totally self-made.
Yeah. The loan with Trump cracked me up. One, because it's just like, yeah, small loan of $1 million. Like, okay, first of all, Like, never has anybody made a more silver spoonish comment
Yeah,
in the history of the world.
Yeah.
But two, I did appreciate his dad, like the story about. I'm sure you've heard like the casino story when he needed like to have a certain amount of assets with the casino in order to keep it. So his
I don't know
dad
if I've
walks
heard this.
in and drops. I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like his dad walked in, bought $5 million in chips, walked out. So they could have it. They were like, that's an illegal loan. And he's like, fucking prove it.
Yeah, well, right.
What, if somebody else did that, is that an issue? It's like, well, he's your dad. Customer.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I did have to appreciate that one. Like, that's a work of genius. But it was his dad that did it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was hilarious. But yeah, the small loan of $1 million was like, dude, come on.
Well, yeah, and I think reporting has recently revealed it was actually more like 14 million.
Probably.
But, it was probably something like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like $1 million cash, and then
Yeah,
dad bought all this other stuff and just gave it
get
to
all the
him,
credit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Must be nice.
fuck yeah. If I had it, I wouldn't complain.
Yeah, no, it would be great. I also wouldn't talk about it.
No.
But I definitely wouldn't complain about it.
No, I'll tell you what. If I had that much money, like you couldn't pay me enough. You couldn't talk me into it enough. You could never get me to run for president.
No, I don't understand why these guys do those.
No, like it's
I don't
amazing
get
to me
it.
that it's just millionaires and billionaires that want that job.
Yeah,
Like you want that?
yeah,
You
no.
want your whole personal life in business.
Well, you notice the
And-
good ones don't.
Yeah,
The ones who have half a clue.
yeah. Elon Musk isn't
not.
running for president.
Elon Musk, yeah. The one I always think of is Jared Diamond, the CEO of Citibank.
Oh, Jamie Dimon.
Or Jamie Dimon, yeah. Who will everyone? Jared Diamond's an author. Jamie Dimon will come out every once in a while and be like, X, Y, and Z is fucked, but he's not saying, and I'm running for president to solve this. Nope, I run Citibank, bitches.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy.
I think Jamie Dimon. He's J.P. Morgan Chase, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
J.P. Morgan Chase.
Yeah.
I just screwed that whole thing up.
Yeah, they're two totally different banks.
Very totally.
Yeah, it's not like they do the exact same thing.
Lots
Like,
of money either way.
Remember Jon Stewart when he was talking, like, this was post-recession, but still kind of feeling the aftershock.
Mm-hmm.
Remember he was talking about the bankers, and he was like, so none of them have been arrested for basically breaking the earth.
Right.
It's like,
right.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Arrest them and throw them in jail with the
Exactly.
black people? I mean, that's not gonna happen.
No. Just buy something, donate something. Here's $100 million. I have 1,000 of these coming to me this year.
There's this the Michael Moore movie about. Was it that one? I think it was his one about capitalism. And it
Oh, yeah,
was
love story.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and I think it was about. I think it's in this one, but don't hold me to this. Where he talks about the CEOs getting arrested, and he has like a scene in the middle of it, which is like if cops came to arrest. Cops, the TV show,
Mm-hmm.
came to arrest CEOs the way that they arrest the average person they run into. So imagine people jumping out of windows.
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
I mean, it would be crazy. I mean, it is interesting that we treat violent criminals so very different from those people when the actual impact of those people is significantly higher
Yeah.
on our society as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, the individual acts are so heinous that you're just like, ooh, yeah, you have to go away for a long time. This isn't a
You
small
would think
thing.
so.
Yeah.
You would think so, but of course that never ends up being what happens.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, some of those guys should have definitely ended up in jail because they damn well knew what they were doing.
Well, and to me, that was the weirdest part about it because, I mean, I was not in that world, but I obviously, everything I was studying and doing was pointing to, hey, you should probably figure out, what's going on in this because you can learn from it. But I was watching that, and I really was sitting there thinking, like, I don't know. And I'm sure what most people would say listening to this is like somebody, but I don't know who you arrest. Because if you're the CEO, that doesn't mean that you know all of the intricacies of every single department. If you're in charge of that department, you were put there to do a job that you're trying to do. I think that to me is the most difficult part. It's like, okay, if we're going to arrest somebody, who? Because I don't know the answer to that. Everybody, all the bankers.
All of them? I don't know.
That'd be interesting to see what would happen to global finance. Like, U.S. would just go, trying to take over. They're like, yeah, we'll throw them in jail, but not all of them.
One thing I've learned in life is that if one D-bag goes down, there's always another D-bag ready to take their spot. So somehow I think we'd be all right.
Yeah, have you ever seen The Big Short?
I have, yeah.
I really liked that movie because I remember my parents watched it, and they came to me, and they were like, hey, can you watch this and see if that's right? And I was like, yeah, sure, because they were like, they made it really easy to understand, and that's not normal, and it's Hollywood, so maybe not. It's like, but they did. I mean, when they'd have those little cutaway scenes, and they'd talk about what people were doing and how it was getting done, it was like, if the entire derivative market, they had a derivative part of the Series 7 exam that I had to do to become an advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was they weren't called derivatives in the literature. They were called collateralized mortgage obligations.
Right.
And I read that, and I remember just thinking about that one section for like a week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this doesn't make any fucking sense.
No.
How is this the thing?
How is it legal?
Yeah. It's gambling.
You can still do it.
Yeah.
They renamed it, repackaged it as something
of course,
else.
yeah. Of course.
But it's gambling on something that's so fundamentally important to the American economy.
Yeah.
That that's completely insane that that's legal.
Yeah, well, and at the same time that they were saying, no, you shouldn't have this market, because rates had gone down so much, they were telling people that they needed to go back and refinance their mortgage.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you know anything about those derivatives, they're based off of a period of time. So basically, they'll put it into like 15-year or 30-year based on the mortgage, and you get that interest rate in a period of time. But they sell them then based on the idea that not all of those are going to get all the way to 30.
Right,
They're going to be refinanced, go to somebody else, and then they'll no longer be a part of that package. And it's like, one, that's too complicated for anything.
Oh, yeah.
That's too complicated for anybody to go through. I don't care if you have the best 1,000 actuaries in the world. No, you can't you can't predict that kind of behavior. But then to actively tell people, like, you need to go refinance your mortgage and just fuck up the ones that were actually performing, like, cool story.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's fundamentally crazy that you would even invest money in that. There's so many more unknowns in that.
Yeah.
Than, say, even an equity investment. I don't understand why you would take that risk, except that it had been right that it was totally stable and boring.
Well, that was how it was perceived, because it was always perceived. It was always taught as what is more financially secure than the American mortgage.
Right. Well,
and the answer is not a fucking derivative. There's a reason a mortgage is like credit score, down payment. There's a reason a mortgage is fairly easy to get, because they feel like they can predict what home values will be long term. And honestly, even in the recession, they weren't off. Home values came back in most areas. Some areas they went down. But in most areas, they've come back and they've gone higher than what they used to be. That being said, a derivative doesn't own the house.
Right.
The bank owned the house.
Right.
You don't own it.
There's no actual collateral.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to another conversation that I had. I can't remember who it was that I had this conversation with, but this is kind of a story that's getting brought up, so I wanted to get your historical perspective on it. But all of the conversation going on about student loans, because I know you've got a couple of long-ass degrees in your family, between you and Amy.
Yeah. Amy and I have a much nicer house worth of student loan debt than the house we live in.
Yeah.
So, this speaks
it's all
to
up
me.
here. But, I mean, so I think you probably have a unique perspective because, one, you guys know that you have that, and two, if they're able to come in and say, like, we're going to wipe it all out, it's like, I have a big issue with it because it's like it's $1.4 trillion that we didn't sign up for. I don't, like, we continue to pretend like we have money. We don't have money. But it's an interesting thing because I'll tell you my perspective, and then my biggest issue with it isn't that I don't think it makes sense necessarily, because obviously if we were a financially intelligent country, then I'd be like, yeah, if we had, a few $1 trillion in debt that was just churning and our GDP was still high and everything else, it was like that should be a good topic of conversation. That's not where we are. We're spending $1 trillion. In the last decade, 5 years of that, we spent over $1 trillion just per year that we didn't have. And so when I look at it, I just think like, this is not something that is backed by an asset outside of if you look at the asset as a more educated public. And in some circumstances, I don't see it outside of being able to say I have a degree. Like some degrees, I'm like, I don't know if that's an asset for everybody.
Do you mean like history degrees? I think I would agree with that. Yeah.
No, but I mean like your history degree, you are in the field.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to me, that makes a ton of sense.
Right. Or at least field adjacent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and maybe I'm off base on that, but I mean, when I see that, that's my biggest argument. It's like, if you want to say that you're investing in your people, you have to be intelligent enough to invest in making sure that our fiscal house is in order. Like, by the way, pay the 9/11 first responders. Let's make sure that shit happens first.
One would think that would be undeniable.
Yeah, that should just be done, obviously. So I'm not talking about stuff like that.
Like 2 days after 9/11, not in 2018.
Exactly. So, I mean, but you talk about stuff like that, but then it's like, man, if you're going to, like, as far as, like, college and how expensive it is and how many schools there are and everything else that goes into that, that's a really tough sell to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going into this, right? So one of the things that's happening is that this is one of those few areas where so you take a company like Walmart, for example, right, which has all these part-time employees, and basically what they're allowing the government to do is to subsidize their labor force by not offering full-time employment, not offering retirement, not offering health care, right? Whenever we talk about that, we sort of always talk about it as the private sector having the federal government subsidize them in some way.
Right.
Higher education is this weird one where primarily states have basically allowed the federal government to subsidize it.
Yeah.
So you have states like Missouri, for example, that since the 1960s has made significant cuts to its public school system, its public higher education system.
Which has had a great result, I assume.
Yeah, well, and what it is an increase in student loan debt, right? So states sort of somewhere along the line figured out we can significantly cut back on how much we're funding universities. Universities will just charge more to the consumer, and the consumer who can't really afford it will just take out more loans from the federal government. And because our culture has taught everybody that the key to the middle class and financial stability is having a college degree, people will allow themselves to be bamboozled into that. For myself, I'm actually in this weird place now where I have more debt in interest than I do in principal.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I've been in school for so long.
Yeah.
Haven't been making payments. So it's just been capitalizing.
Yeah.
And so now I have just this insane amount of, I don't really pay any attention to any of that, and I'll explain why in just a second. But, so we have this, so we have, first of all, the problem that states really aren't carrying their weight when it comes to higher education. And they need to increase the amount of money that they're supporting higher education with, especially Midwestern states.
Yeah.
Right? Because places like Missouri and Kansas, our weather sucks.
Yeah.
People don't want to live here.
Yeah.
Right? People do live here because the cost of living is cheap and the educational system is quality. And the educational system has remained quality, but the states really need to be carrying on a higher burden for higher education. So that's the first thing. The second thing is not everybody needs a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
We live in this weird world where things are in high demand that you don't need a bachelor's degree for.
Yeah.
And yet we haven't really made that shift yet to say, no, don't go to college. Go to technical school and learn welding because you're going to make a friggin' fortune and you're going to be a whole lot happier. Yeah. Just do that.
And if you get out of the program, if you join a union, they might pay for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's what we need to really sort of shift our thinking on bachelor's degrees.
Yeah.
And you know, even master's degrees and PhDs. You know, using history as an example of this, I'm about a year away from finishing my PhD in history, which has taken me way too long, but I'm about a year away from finishing. When I get done, I have zero chance of getting a job as a professor.
Mm.
The job market is terrible, and it's okay because I actually make more money teaching high school than I ever would actually working as a entry-level professor.
That's cool.
So, yeah, I mean, no, but my lifetime earnings are probably higher where I'm at than if I were able to go down that road. So there's this finite number of PhDs that are needed, and yet colleges keep accepting people into PhD programs.
Right.
It's a revenue driver.
Yeah.
But there's no outcome in the end for them.
Right.
Or very few of those people. So you have that problem too, right? That it's in the best interests of colleges. We have too many colleges, for example, because we don't need as much education as is happening. As much higher education, right? We need a lot of technical training and things like that, but we don't need as many people going to college as go to college. So you have that problem. But then you have, let's come back to me and my debt load for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
When I finished my 2 master's degrees, I had a decision to make about should I continue on with a PhD. And I ultimately decided that it was in my best interest to do that because of a change to the student loan program that Obama had made, which was to create the public service option.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm all said and done, as soon as I go back into repayment, I can qualify for an income-adjusted program. I make payments for 10 years, and because I work for a nonprofit, at the end of 10 years, anything that I have left is forgiven. Now, in my mind, that's kind of all we need to do.
Yep.
You know, I don't know that we need to be going through strenuous effort to forgive the loans of a doctor who's in private practice.
Right.
Right. Now, the doctor who goes and works for, who gets, you know, $500,000 in student loans
mm-hmm.
and then goes to work for the local clinic, their loans are going to be forgiven under the same program.
Gotcha.
Because they work for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So I think we already have built into the system the things that are needed to fix it.
Yeah.
We just have to follow through on that. Now, that means that over time, we're going to end up as a country forgiving, you know, mass quantities. I mean, I'm going to stick the government with a huge bill for my student loans at the end of my time. Mm-hmm. But I'm a teacher. You know, I've spent my time teaching. Like, that is within our national interest.
Yeah. There's value in making sure teachers are taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And my problem with, you know, forgiving everybody's student loans is that, okay, you have fixed the problem as of today.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow, the problem starts all over again.
Yeah.
So unless we're actually going to take care of some of these other things,
mm-hmm.
then there's really no reason to try to address this in any sort of a global way.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's a very intelligent view. That's why I wanted to ask you about it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Because you've never seemed like the kind of person that you always think things through, even if the end result isn't the answer that you had assumed you would believe in. So you're willing to change your mind on stuff, and I appreciate that. And like anything with regard to educators, and not educators that are working for like for-profit colleges,
mm-hmm.
but educators that are, you know, high schools, middle schools, elementary mm-hmm. schools. Like we talk a big game about, you know, how educators are the best thing and they're teaching our children, they're teaching our future, and then it's like, hey, but can you buy some more fucking crayons?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
please,
exactly.
Because we don't have enough, and, you know, taxes and shit. It's like I don't like when I can't remember what it was, and they may have increased it, but I remember when they were talking about the new tax plan, they were like, yeah, teachers can only write off $100 in material.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I work for a pretty well-funded private school, and I end up spending more than that, you know, because it's just things that you end up needing, you know, buying. It's, you know.
Or because you're a teacher, you probably walk by something, and you're like, that would help me out a lot.
That would be great. Yeah.
Kids would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I walked past I don't know if you've ever seen this, but they now sell Elmer's glue in the gallon size.
Oh, God.
I have no need for this. I really want it. I don't know why. I think I just want to like pour it out and stick my hand in it.
Just feel around.
Yeah, just feel around it. I don't know. Like that's kind of goofy. But yeah, I mean, in my case, that would be illegitimate. But if you were a kindergarten teacher,
I bet you'd use the heck
that's
out
a
of that.
lot of kids eating glue that you just solved right there for $10 for a gallon, right?
Yeah, just don't pour it down the drain or outside, or you kill a whale.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One of the other questions that I know I had was, and we talked about this. We talked about it on the last podcast because I found it really interesting what you originally had said about Iraq. That it was basically like it's 3 areas of people that hate each other. Let's all put them in one country and see how that goes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
not well.
Yeah, no. But it makes me think even more about the fact that Eastern culture. I mean, China, Japan, not Australia because we kind of created some of that.
Sure.
But, that region, that Asian Pacific region, we don't concentrate at all. I mean, Russia a little bit because they're basically a European country in a way.
Right.
But that kind of southern area, we don't know any history at all. And that's pretty much where everybody on Earth lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a very strange thing to me. So I think in my text message I said Eastern culture, the highlights. And it's like, yeah, that's the most Western perspective ever.
Just tell me the good stuff.
just tell me like the 5 things
What
they
are the
did.
top 3 things I need to know?
But I mean, it's an interesting thing to me that we
5,000 years of
don't.
history.
Yeah. But it's interesting to me that we don't really concentrate on that. It's basically like we go Fertile Crescent, Egypt, Europe. Like Fertile Crescent, Egypt, Greece, Italy, Rome. And then Europe formation.
Yeah, I think we're getting better at that.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's still just the fact that people don't know that much about it.
Yeah.
I think it's a difficult subject for teachers to teach because they've probably gone their entire lives without having significant exposure to it.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that we don't. We're currently confronting China in new and interesting ways
all the time.
And I think that it's pretty clear at this point that the Chinese understand us and we don't really understand them.
Yeah. For a long time, that's how they liked it.
Well, yeah, and I think they would prefer that it still remain that way because we don't really
We know Mao and then
kind
nothing
of,
else.
Right. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And then there was some other stuff that happened and
And then Xi Jinping.
We don't really know their culture,
Like the thing that's really difficult for me is, and this is a recent view, this isn't historical view, but is they're, outside of Russia, they're pretty much known as communism central.
Right.
But then they have like Alibaba. They have all these companies that are coming out of China. And even though we know that they're heavily regulated, we celebrate it in a way. It's like, look at that. They're becoming more capitalist. And it's like, are they? I don't know what's going on here.
Well, yeah, I mean, that whole thing is really weird, right? Because they've sort of redefined communism to de-emphasize economics, but never de-emphasize social control.
Right.
So, it's pretty clear, I think, that in China there's a high degree of economic freedom if you can pay for it.
Oh.
And that other types of freedom, the freedom that we would maybe hold a little closer to our heart, just simply doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's weird, right? That's difficult for us as Americans to wrap our minds around. And so that sort of creates a challenge because we see these things that are happening as a liberalization. Alibaba, right? Oh, great, they're embracing capitalism. This is
they
wonderful.
get to list on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, no, they're not embracing capitalism.
No.
They're not embracing capitalism in the way that we think of it because they're not embracing the other things that we associate with capitalism.
Right.
Right? That fundamental idea of freedom of exchange leads to freedom of exchange of ideas, to freedom of speech, to freedom of religion. All these things are intertwined.
And they all lead to Pornhub.
And they all lead to porn. Yeah, absolutely they do. And those things are all so intertwined in our culture and our understanding of capitalism.
Yeah.
That when we see something that kind of looks like that, we're celebrating it, not realizing that it's actually something radically different.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what it is at this point, except that it is a tremendous economic engine.
Yeah.
And it is has raised the standard of living in China significantly over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
But it's still not freedom.
Right. Well, what a strange thing. And obviously, I'm sure with them, the perspective is just what they're living.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, well, we saw America grow up and now we're seeing us. Like, that's probably not the perspective at all. It's probably just things look like they're getting better. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that in China there probably is this sense that now it's our time.
Yeah.
Right, because everything's been sort of pointing in their direction. On the other hand, it's also pretty clear that their economy is about to suffer a recession of some sort.
Yeah.
Or is currently suffering a recession of some sort. And I don't know, it's easier in a command economy to sort of make things work. Mm-hmm. But so much has been liberalized there economically that, yeah, you can force companies to do some things still. But sort of the creativity that drives economic activity is not going to do well under forced action.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how that's going to work out for them.
Yeah.
So they've got some pretty tremendous problems, I think.
Well, it's the $1 trillion gamble too, because, whether we like it or not, their economic engine has been what's driven us. I mean,
yeah,
absolutely. When I came out of college, I worked for Waddell and Reed. They made us memorize this presentation that we had to go and give out to people. It was called the Infinite Loop, and it was basically how the United States is benefiting from China's growth is benefiting from the United States. And it's this is also kind of what started to drive the recession that we had with real estate. If you're not independently strong in several areas, one area crashes and you go down. It was China's, and I remember they talked about we always had to say I'm sure everybody's heard it, but it's past results are not indicative of future results. But we would talk about the fact that they were growing at 20% a year it was. Yeah, they've been growing 20% a year. Well, didn't you just say that one thing? No, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
And it's a strange thing to see, but I wonder, too, if because they've liberalized a little bit, if that to the people smells like freedom. If they're walking around going, yeah, I mean, people are getting put in jail, and that's obviously bad, and we've been dealing with that, but it's not North Korea. It's not Mao. We're getting stuff.
Yeah.
We can't look for everything we want online, but we can find a lot.
Well, we sort of have that in this country, though,
Yeah.
right? Where we sort of misunderstand consumer culture as being freedom.
Yeah.
But the freedom to buy is not freedom.
Right.
Right? So, yeah, there probably is this sense, especially among people who are old enough to remember when they didn't have access to that level of consumer good.
Yeah.
That, yeah, we're free. Things are moving along. Of course, in China, you also have, if you try to assert actual freedom, things really don't tend to go very well.
Yeah.
Right? So there is, I think, probably reminders for them of what that reality still is.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What, speaking of Mao and all the good stuff that he did for China, killing lots of people.
Yeah.
but one thing, and maybe I'm just a complete idiot and didn't and missed every single day where they talked about this in school.
Sure.
But the one thing that I thought it was kind of a mind fuck, and it was not yesterday, but it was kind of an embarrassingly long time that it took for me to understand this. But within communism, especially Russian communism, China's communism, you don't believe in God. Religion teaches freedom. Religion teaches all the things that they probably, at least some of the things that they probably don't want you to know.
Well, and religion also gets your eye off the ball. You know what I mean? Yeah, religion. So Marx in particular thought that religion was regressive.
Gotcha.
That we couldn't progress as a people as long as we had these crazy religious ideas that we held on to and thought were true and acted on and allowed to inform our present lives.
Yeah.
That the only real thing that mattered was class conflict and doing away with the bourgeoisie, and that if you had religion to fall back on, that would always weaken you as a class.
Yeah.
The labor would be weakened by religion, because you would never view yourselves as laborers. You would view yourselves as Catholic laborers, Lutheran laborers.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of this had to do with class identity also.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if everyone's equal, you don't want a bunch of religions prancing around.
No. I mean, right. And like the American example of this is like really is with a place where, Marx is predicting economic futures. I don't think is real great. But Marx, as a guy examining economic reality at the time that he was writing and even into our present, really nailed some shit.
Yeah.
And so, like in America, we have a perfect example of this, right? Is that poor white people and poor black people have the exact same economic issues, the exact same cultural issues for the most part, right? The exact same social issues. And if they came together as a unified bloc, because we are a democracy, could seriously change some things.
Yeah.
That's never, ever, ever going to happen because of their inability to see each other as having the same problems, even though they have slightly different cultures.
Right.
So, and this is done by design within the United States. There's a long history of sort of the upper classes trying to get black people and poor whites and poor blacks to understand that they are different, when in reality they really aren't different.
Right.
And so like anything that can divide culture within Marxism was seen as a negative.
Gotcha.
So you de-emphasize race. You create one national race. You get rid of religion. Our religion is the state. You have to create one unified idea of what it is that we're doing, where we're going, and who we are in order to actually be able to overcome the power of the bourgeoisie.
Gotcha. Sounds like communist propaganda, but okay.
Well, I mean, it is, right? But on the other hand, I think they're fundamentally right. I mean, that's the thing. Marx.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that your point about poor whites, poor blacks. If you look at them as a unit.
Yeah.
I mean, when we hear it every day that income inequality is at its worst point and is past what it was in the 1920s.
Yeah.
It's like we're past that.
Right.
The 1920s didn't exactly fucking end with a great 1930s.
No, it did not.
So, the 1930s weren't great for us. So if you know that and you know that there's that much income inequality, it's like that is a great way to separate people that are powerful together.
Yeah,
it's like
absolutely.
If you've got, I don't know what the number is, but if you've got, 200 million voters that could all affect change, you want to keep those people as separated as possible.
Absolutely.
You want to find everything wrong with the other party so that you can affect a change you want.
And that explains America today.
Exactly. We're doing good, man.
We're doing great. As we always have.
Well, getting back to circling back to Roosevelt, like it was amazing to me to read with the Bull Moose Party, like after he was done and he got so pissed off at Taft.
Yeah.
And he was basically willing to try to beat two people, which he wouldn't. But he was basically trying to beat two people to get back on because he just could not stand things. But if you read behind the lines, it's like from the time he came into politics until the time he basically was finished running for president of the Bull Moose, the man had an incredible progressive change.
Yeah.
He went from as conservative as it gets to, I won't say as progressive as it gets, but for the age, pretty
damn close.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he would be the progressive wing of the Democratic Party today would speak to him. Yeah. He would understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Because he understood in a way that I think a lot of people didn't at the time, at least not a lot of people who are in power, that economic inequality was dangerous to society.
Yeah.
And that you could take steps to address some of those issues without actually destroying capitalism.
Yeah.
And that's, it's funny that we sort of live in this age now where that you're either a capitalist or a socialist.
Yeah.
And that idea that you can be a capitalist who understands that there are problems with capitalism, that if we could address those would make capitalism better, is too gray of an idea to ever get any traction.
Yeah.
But that's really where we're at, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of these crazy things that you hear about are just not going to happen.
Right.
They're never going to happen. The United States is never going to adopt a single payer Medicare for all style system.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. However, there's clearly some policy issues,
Yeah.
right, about access to medical care. There's, I think, bigger issues around how much does it really cost to get medical care?
Yeah.
What is the difference between the real cost of an exam and what gets billed to your insurance company that inflates the prices? And
Well, exactly.
there are certainly reasons why that happens. But, so there are policy areas that can be addressed and make things better for everybody. But I
Right.
do think that we as a country have gotten to this point where we see any policy change as a zero-sum game, and that's just not what it is.
No. I mean, you want policy change. I just wish there was, and fucking wishful thinking, but like it would be nice if there was a politician around right now that could speak, because, and this is what I think Trump was really good at during his run, was if he said something, it was so unpolished and so basic that people caught it. It was like they felt like they understood. And it's like he could break down, whether you agree with it or not, obviously is up for debate. But it was like he was really good at saying, this is bad.
Yeah.
People went, that must be bad.
It's very clear, right?
Yeah.
He's very super clear. And I think this is part of the problem that the moderates in this country have had. And it's not a problem with them. It's a problem with us. Like I always, whenever I see John Kasich, for example, give an interview, he throws out a statement and there's like 14 qualifiers to it. And you have to have all this background information to understand what it is that he's getting at.
But if you read through it, you're like, yeah, that makes
But
sense.
I 1,000% agree with just about everything that comes out of the man's mouth.
Yep.
Right? And I have some differences, for
Of
sure.
course,
He's
yeah.
a little bit more conservative than I am. But it's this is kind of the problem we're at as a country, is that we're not willing to do any homework. We're not willing to put any forethought into anything.
Yeah.
We want politicians who are able to make a very, very gray world completely black and white, so that I, without, any sort of education or background or having picked up a book in the last 4 decades, can participate in political discussions that happen at my base level. Well, unfortunately, our government has become so complex you can't.
Yeah.
And people who say it shouldn't be that complex can go fuck themselves, because we're living in a complex world, and this is just the way it's going to be from now on.
Yeah.
And there are no easy choices.
No.
Everything is going to be a mess.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I know. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go.
I was just going to say, when you say that, the moment that I remember, and we might have talked about this on the last one, or I was talking to somebody else about it, but before, like, Paul Ryan got into his speakership, I was a big Paul Ryan fan.
Sure.
Because whether or not you agreed with him, he at least presented plans. He presented options. And my wife and I, Nikki and I, were driving back from an event, and we caught the first half of he and Biden's debate. And it was the Nixon-Kennedy thing all over again. It was like, if you were listening to that on the radio, you were like, Paul Ryan is destroying this guy. Joe Biden came off sounding like he was just trying to make a loud talking point and had no other information. And Paul Ryan's like, here's what this is, here's how you bring troops out of here, here's what you do here. And he's going through all these economic plans. He's going straight back at him. There is no question in my mind that on TV, people are just like tweeting out like, well, Biden lost that one, he's going crazy. I got home, turned the TV on, and Biden's sitting up, straight up, smiling at the camera, smiling at everybody, and Paul Ryan is just like hunched over, focused, and trying to explain his ideas. It's like, oh, no, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Copy him for a second. Stand
Right.
back. Smile a bit. Because, I mean, as soon as I got home, it looked like he was losing immediately. And it was just crazy to me because I'm sitting there like, I needed you to be the smart one, because we have the Romneytron 3000 against President Obama, and that's ultimately who you're voting for.
Right.
But if you can take out Biden, you take away his guard dog.
Right.
And, at that point, I was a huge fan of the Romney-Ryan ticket. That was just me at that point. But I was really a fan of the ticket because he had Paul Ryan at the time. And, yeah, it was just so depressing to be like, oh, I wish people would turn off the TV and turn on the radio. I wish this was 1940.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, that plays to your point exactly. It was like you had the guys sitting there with big ideas and big quotes, like, we're pulling out our troops in 2013. And Paul Ryan saying, like, that's a bad idea, not because we shouldn't pull out, but because if you do it when you say you're going to, this is, like, that's when they always attack. So we're leaving our people there and decreasing their numbers right at the time they start attacking again. Nope. That was a qualifier.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because Biden, who so far is the Democrat I'm supporting in the primary, he has been pretty good at boiling something down to black and white, and then the answer is only half complete, and then it ends up being radically different somewhere else, you know? So it is interesting that, like, one of the things that it's funny that, so in the last debate, you know, where Kamala Harris came after him about busing.
Yeah.
And it's like she made an issue black and white that is beyond gray.
Yeah.
Right? And beyond gray and 40 years old.
Yeah.
So now he had to explain his position on this his very gray position on this very gray issue
from 40 years
from
ago.
40 years ago. And people are like, well, that was terrible. And it's like, no, man, this is complex. This is, how do you re-engineer a society after 100 years of separation?
Right.
Like, okay, this is not, basically no answer is going to work.
No.
Right? This is not going to be pretty. This is going to be ugly.
Well, in the moment that it turned into not a black and white issue in policy, but a black and white issue.
Yeah. Oh,
he
and
loses.
then there's that too. Right.
Yeah.
So he's automatically going to lose when it comes to that, or at least the interpretation is going to be that he loses.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting because he's gotten pretty good at doing that. And Obama was interesting because he had a pretty good way of sort of boiling a gray issue down into black and white and being like, this is my very black and white answer. Of course, the reality is going to be infinitely more complex.
Yep.
I'm just not going to get into that now.
Exactly.
Which is kind of what you end up having to do to get any traction with the American public, because we're like incapable of digesting complex ideas.
Yeah. Which is terrifying. Do you think that goes back to the education system? Like, let's just keep people dumb.
I think we've always been like that. I think there's just something. Well, so there's like not a robust history, but like stronger than you would think about anti-intellectualism all throughout American history. And about this just need as Americans to sort of reject intellectualism, to reject complexity, to reject experts, right?
Yeah.
You're not you spent your whole life studying that. You're not going to tell me, because I'm a free American living in this democracy and I get to make choices for myself. Not understanding, it's like, it is interesting to me that plumbing, for example, which I have heard is relatively straightforward, right? We always call in an expert for that. But for something that's really complex and hard to understand, like the American legal system, we always assume we could just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Or that it's a mess. Here's what's wrong. I'm going to tell you what's wrong. And, like the debt issue is another one, like, well, we just spend too much money. Great. Where do you make a cut?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And but so we sort of have this reflex against being told things when it comes to democracy that we don't have when it comes to things
like cancer
that are no, actually, I mean, think about that too.
Oh, true. Yeah,
that's
sort
of recently joined the fray here of things that we reject. Where we're like, oh, I'm not going to get vaccine. I'm not going to get a vaccine. Like, okay, great. Yeah, well,
good luck with that.
Enjoy having your kid friggin' die from
a very preventable thing.
A very preventable disease. Yeah. When
polio
makes a comeback, come talk to me about that.
Yeah,
polio, not polo.
I wasn't going to call you out. It's okay.
I appreciate that.
No, I when you brought up that in the very beginning of your rant, I literally this morning I showed something that a person had posted online that I knew a few years back, and I'm not going to be Christopher Hitchens and pretend and like just have a complete issue with religion forever. But I don't go to church or anything like that, but I've always identified myself as a Christian. That's become more complicated as I get older. but he this guy posts this thing on Facebook, which is obviously just a center for intellectual and intelligent thought.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He says the meme is basically like, I don't remember the picture, but don't tell me that the Bible is written by man as like a bad thing when you trust, and I have to get this right because there's something thrown in that doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, when you don't trust when you trust horoscopes, the weatherman, science journals, and newspapers. It's like,
what?
Whoa, don't
Wait.
throw science journals in. No.
That's all equivalent.
Yeah. I was like, you can say newspapers in a way right now, like if you think online newspaper, like that kind of thing. You can say horoscopes without question. Don't throw in science journals like it's just something to throw away. Like, I can't believe you believe that's science. Like, oh, for God's sake.
It's for nerds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could have been okay with the rest of it when he threw in science journal, like, and not okay. That still would be annoying. It was like, don't throw in science journals like in the middle of that.
Right.
Like, you shouldn't trust science. Like, dude.
Yeah. Like, we could have a debate about science.
Yeah.
But I think there's a fundamental, place you start where.
Yeah.
This is, it's funny. It's like, it is interesting to me the sort of the way we reject certain things, and the reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my mother always says, Mom, if you're listening, I apologize. My mother always says something to the effect of, well, I don't believe in this climate change stuff. They called it global warming before that. And back in the 70s, we had global cooling was the problem. And they don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, well, they clearly knew something was changing.
Mm-hmm.
And as they've researched more and methods have become more refined, they're pretty sure now that it's just going to look radically different in different places depending on the way in which the increase in the overall heat of the planet plays out in different places.
Yeah.
So it's, again, very gray.
Yeah.
Right?
Why is springtime in June? That's always like my
Yeah.
It's like winter starts in January now.
Right.
And we have spring in June.
Yeah.
This is not fun.
Absolutely.
Why is it snowing in May?
Yeah. I don't know. It's really confusing.
Yeah. And again, it's like you were saying, it's a problem where you can't just shut it down because you're not educated on the subject.
Right, absolutely. And that's, for whatever reason, we as Americans are always like, I'm not educated, so fuck you. I think this. It's like, no, you can't do that. Like, until you do the research, until you know what the hell you're talking about, just shut the hell up about it.
Yeah.
Trust the people who know.
But please go do that research.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Go do it.
Please.
Go do the independent research.
Yeah.
You will find that scientists have debates among themselves about this shit. That's the part that's up for grabs.
Yeah.
Where you get to form an opinion.
Yeah, well, I have a buddy of mine who threw this out, and I had to tell him, like, dude, I need you to do something for me and not say this ever again. Like, I love you to death, man, but please don't. But he said the line, and every time I hear this line, I'm just like, I wish scientists would come up with just another term so I don't have to keep defending this crap. But it's like, well, they call them theories in science. So what do you think they know about it? It's like, the theory of gravity is a theory.
Yeah.
It's a jump out a window, see if it's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that goes back to this like fundamental ignorance.
Yeah.
It's like you call it a theory because you're like 95% certain that it's right.
Yeah.
But you're leaving open the possibility it could change because that idea that you're going to take in new information and maybe revise is really, really important to the scientific process.
Yeah, well, I heard something about like one of Einstein's theories. I don't know if it's the general theory of relativity or what, but like they think they've disproven part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, that's science.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
His theory is right almost every time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But guess what? We live in kind of a weird universe that we don't understand, and we're just a bunch of Like, we're a bunch of things that in the last 100,000 years have developed.
Yeah. Well, it's like, Neil deGrasse Tyson always says the universe is under no obligation to be understood by you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean.
That's the best comment ever.
But we all act like.
Yeah.
Like with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, of course I can understand it. Like,
yeah.
No, there's shit out there you can't understand.
No.
We don't understand it. Like, you're never going to be able to understand it.
Yeah.
Black holes are never going to actually make sense.
No.
Ever.
Yeah. The best scientists that we've ever had have gone, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe if you float through it, you go through time. I don't know.
You go through time, go to a different universe. There's all these theories. Yeah, well, and that's the thing that's an issue. It's like there are then like the theories where they say they don't know. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, well, the theory of this is wrong. Like,
right.
No. Don't think about it like that. This is a mathematical equation. That's all they're, like, at this point, that's what they're figuring out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What it takes to get to this answer or what that answer is when you do all of these things.
Right. And it's really hard to translate math into something tangible.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love the fact that he makes it easy.
So the explanations are always just kind of like, well, this could be,
Yeah.
It's always funny to me that, like evangelicals every once in a while get on a big thing about evolution and just drag Darwin's name through the mud. It's like if you ever read The Species or the what the hell is this book called?
Origin of Species.
The Origin of Species. Yeah. Species. Thanks. I'm really blowing.
You almost had it
in the memory department today. Like the whole book is like written by Grandpa, and Grandpa is like, well, I saw two birds. They were the same bird. They were different colors. This could mean a thing. I don't know.
I have never read it. Now I kind of want to go back and read it.
I'm guessing they came from the same place, and now they're different.
Who knows?
Who knows? And the whole thing is just sort of like, what a coinky dink, And it's like, really? This is the guy that you guys have spent the last 100 years trashing? The guy who's like, well, fuck, I don't know. It seems like they evolved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know that we should have gotten so up in arms about this.
Yeah, you should read this. He admits he has no idea. Yeah, I mean, I saw some debate. One of the 1,000 I've watched on YouTube because I am completely addicted to YouTube.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. It's probably bad. But I watched a debate and there was somebody who had that exact same thing. Like, evolution's this and it's not real. We didn't evolve from monkeys. And it's like, well, technically we didn't. We evolved from a pre-human stage. Yeah. You're kind of correct. You're kind of right.
Actually, anywhere from like 4 to 1,800 different versions of human before you get to monkeys. So yeah, we're like way back there.
Yeah. But common ancestor. But yeah, we're different. Yeah, totally. We're not that. Sure. Yeah. If that's what makes you feel better. But they were like, I don't believe in evolution. She's like, in any way or just in humans? He was like, I don't believe it in any way. I was like, you ever get a flu shot?
Yeah, talk to me about wisdom teeth.
Yeah. Well, and she said, she was bringing up the flu. I was like, there's a reason.
Yeah.
It evolves.
Have you noticed how it changes?
Yeah. Do you notice how you have to get a shot every year?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like clearly things are like my big pet peeve is genetically modified people who are out of control about GMOs. It's like literally everything you eat is a GMO.
Yeah. Look up Google corn from the 1700s.
Yeah.
Look at corn now.
Totally different. Yeah.
GMOs feed the world.
Corn from 1,000 years ago is dramatically different from corn from 700 years ago because humans have always been, trying to create better strains of things.
Yeah.
They didn't do it in a lab. They did it in a field the old-fashioned way, but that doesn't mean it's not genetically modified.
Right. George
That's
Washington
exactly
did
what
that.
it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we've been doing this stuff for forever. There is like this sort of like weird, and like you see this a lot, like discussions of Native Americans. It's like the Native Americans were natural and lived in the wild. Like, they like burned fields. They planted crops. Like they
were the ones that taught us how to plant when.
Yeah, absolutely. They're.
Here, you put a fish right there.
They were certainly more connected to the land than we are.
Yeah.
But our idea of the land they lived in was not natural because they had already changed it.
Yeah.
This is an idea I'm totally just stealing from a much better historian than me.
That's okay.
But regardless, it's like, that's not natural. Like there is no such thing as pure corn.
Yeah.
That you can just buy that hasn't been messed with in some way. Like just chill. It'll all be fine.
Well, like, do you walk around and just find corn like what it looks like in a field? Like, are you just like walking your property line like, oh shit, some corn grew out here. It's 7 feet tall.
Yeah,
That's
look at that.
amazing.
It's amazing.
It's natural
It's so
corn.
yellow. This is great.
Yeah, I understand the people that freak out like with the chemicals that get cleaned with,
Oh,
like some of the stuff
yeah,
that they
no,
won't accept in
absolutely.
Europe and stuff. But yeah, the no GMO thing, it's like, oh,
Give me a
bullshit.
break. Give me a break.
Yeah, dude, we're GMOs.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely we are.
Oh my God. Yeah, it is amazing to me, but it's a buzzword. It's a buzz. I mean, it's
people don't really think about what it means.
No.
It's just some, crazy guy in a lab messing with my food and
yeah.
okay, sure.
Well, Nikki. So I have a thing about. Do you listen to revisionist history?
No.
No, probably because you just know it all at this point.
Sure. Let's just go with that. Sounds great.
Well, it's a podcast by Malcolm Gladwell. It's always like one of the top 10, and I'm sure you know what it is. I was just saying it for here, but it's interesting because I like that he goes back and he'll do something like he did an interview with with somebody. It was the guy who has the record for the best percentage of free throw shots in the NBA.
Okay.
And he did it with like granny style.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so he's teaching people to do that, and they're getting like they've been shooting this other way their entire life, and they shoot his way for 5 minutes, and they're already doing better.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Are you going to do it?" Like, no, it's embarrassing.
No, I'm not going to do it.
And it's weird. He's like, I do this with NBA players. I do this with high school players. I do it with everybody, and it's always a better result.
You want to come back to my earlier comment about how difficult it is to express masculinity in a non-toxic way?
Yeah.
This is a real good example of toxic masculinity. Fuck no, I'm not shooting granny style. I don't care if I miss.
But in that he talks about the results of the guy who came around and said, like, I can't remember, I'm going to butcher this story, but basically he had a heart attack or somebody in his family had a heart attack, and he blamed it on the fact that McDonald's fried their fries in lard. And he was the guy that got everybody to change because that was fat and that was gross and it was awful. But if you fry in vegetable oil, there's your option.
It's
so
from veggies.
They, of course, never tasted any better. Like, they never tasted better than they did back then. And pretty much everybody I've ever talked to agrees.
Yeah.
It's like, they're still good, but they're not that good.
Yeah.
And but they ended up finding out that, one, it was just as bad, if not worse, for you, because that's an animal and this is a vegetable, and you can process certain things in a different way. Like, but two, like, McDonald's had to change so much of their practices because frying in vegetable oil, getting all over everything, is way harder to clean up and mask and everything else than frying in lard. And so it was this whole podcast about how basically McDonald's had to, because of public opinion, cower to this guy, and really he was wrong. And so now it's been like 30 years, and they have to invest so much money in just like washing things the right way. So but yeah, it's a very interesting thing when you have like buzzwords or moments where people would just like, nope, this is wrong, and everybody's like, yeah, that does sound wrong.
And that's a good example of black and white, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, lard would be worse for you than vegetable oil.
Yeah. Why? Well, it's a vegetable. It's healthy.
And that's an animal.
Yeah. Duh. Yeah, vegan.
Yeah, they're all very healthy.
Do you want to grab another one?
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Let's take a break real quick. We'll come back. If I can push pause on this thing.
Once you get past St. Louis.
Yeah. We didn't drive. We obviously didn't drive to Nashville, but when we went to North Carolina to see a friend of ours, the way it took us, we actually went into Tennessee and then came back down into where he is, because he's like right in the middle of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it's beautiful. But when we got into Tennessee, we drove by a place that looked a little scary, and it said Jonestown.
Oh.
And I was like, I don't want to get a drink there.
Yeah. I don't want the Kool-Aid.
No,
Thank you.
Please, car, keep working.
Yeah.
I'm going to need you to not drop me off here. Yeah. All right, so we've only got a little bit of time left. Even though I have the Jefferson Bible over there.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah. I read the concept behind it, and I was like, that sounds like something I'd like to read.
Yeah.
But
That's interesting.
it is funny to me though that it's one of the Gospels, like fairly large book normally, like a 3-pager.
Yeah.
the
Oh
way
yeah.
he
Yeah.
wrote it.
He really cuts through the bullshit.
Yeah, so
you
they
know?
came in to register
Yeah.
for taxes, had a kid, went back. That's it.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah, no little drummer boy. He's good.
Nope.
I just laughed my ass off because that's like it really is like the first 2 pages. Like, yeah, so they were here, they were gone.
But it's fine.
Yeah, his name is Jesus. It's all
Guy
good.
was born.
Yeah.
It was great.
But outside of that, I told you that I wanted to bring you on because I wanted you to convince me that Thomas Jefferson wasn't.
Well, I'm
Bad.
not going to convince you. Because
You might. I'm open.
You've just really got your mind locked that Jefferson was a raging asshole.
I think a lot of those guys were bigger assholes than they get credit for.
Yeah. No, I have no doubt that all of them were exceptionally difficult people to deal with.
Yeah, from what I've read, the only one that you can say like kind of actively knew he should probably not be a complete prick was Washington, and even he failed.
Yeah.
But
sometimes his attempts to not be a complete prick came across as pricky, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely.
like not shaking hands with people when you're president.
Right. Yeah,
I'm trying to hold the office up.
like that. For example.
Yeah.
So Jefferson, let me take a drink of my beer here.
You're good. Also on Washington, like I really hate slavery, but I mean, I don't know what to do with these guys.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a lot of the founding fathers were like that.
Yeah.
You know, and let's be a little bit more direct about it. It was, I don't really like slavery, but I also don't want to be poor.
Yeah.
Right. They understood that a lot of their economic stability came from owning slaves, and they simply weren't willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
Right. And we can criticize them for that if we want to. But I think understanding the place and time in which they were and the culture in which they existed, I think that there's something to be said for some of these guys who looked at this system and thought, this just doesn't really seem right to me.
Right.
They didn't have the personal courage to follow through on that in that regard, right? But that's a difficult thing,
Yeah.
you know. That doesn't justify it or explain it away or anything. I think it's just important to acknowledge the fact that again, what we're dealing with is something really gray.
Yeah.
And it's not very black and white.
Yeah.
Not as black and white as we like to portray it today.
Right.
But back to Jefferson for a moment. So, you know, man, the Declaration of Independence, you can't.
Didn't he pretty much steal that from somewhere?
I mean, large swaths of it are stolen from John Locke. But he made the critical change to it,
Pursuit
which
of Happiness.
was which had been the right to own property, which of course people were worried about would guarantee people property, and you don't want to do that because you know then you might have to give somebody something. But happiness, the pursuit of happiness, right? I mean, so the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. I mean, this is the thing, is that these guys who believed that, like Jefferson, I think really did believe that all men were created equal, even if he lived in a world where they couldn't be.
Right.
And that idea, that promise for the future, that maybe someday in the future we really will all be equal, has been so fundamental to our history and the development of us as a people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we didn't have that to fall back on, if we didn't have that rhetoric to use as shame for ourselves in the present, when we are facing something that's so completely unfair and we know it, but nobody will admit it, it provides such an immediate path to resolving difficult issues.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally we believe this as a people.
Well, that has been, I mean, it's kind of, I think in film, and I'm trying to think of, I think they had a moment in, what's that Netflix movie with Matthew McConaughey where he, like, Free State of Jones, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
But I think they have a moment of that, you know, with that line. I mean, that, I totally admit that all of that is wonderful. It's the man behind it.
Yeah.
And again, that's all of them. Every single one of them had an issue.
All of them.
But it was just like the things that drove me a little insane were not like, and like I obviously am a Hamilton fan, but he was also brash and a dick, and like he would have been the most difficult guy to work with in history.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I completely understand that. It was like when I read the thing that Jefferson just kind of retreated at what was it? He retreated as the military governor of Virginia.
Well, he was the governor of Virginia, yeah.
He was just like, yeah, man, no fight.
Right.
We're good.
And then Alexander Hamilton's out there, like, literally fighting.
Yeah. And again, like, you don't know the decisions that went into that, but it was just like here was this guy, which he's not the same person that's displayed in the musical, by the way. Like Jefferson, like when I saw it, he's very well dressed.
No, that wasn't
He
Jefferson.
was not that.
That wasn't Jefferson.
Yeah, he was kind of like a big personality.
He was not.
Not that.
No, he was not that.
So
no.
I understand why he did it. It's for entertainment purposes. But at the same time, I'm watching that going,
nope.
You didn't read the right book, bro.
Yeah, no.
Like,
no, I mean, I think, Jefferson is, I like Jefferson because Jefferson is complex, right? He's not straightforward. Here's this guy who is, like, he believes in the idea of the American everyman. Right, his big problem with Hamilton is that Hamilton's economic system, Jefferson understands rightly, is going to create winners and losers.
Yeah,
and it's going to create winners and losers largely by chance and by the use of passive income. Right?
Really?
Yeah, because you're rewarding industrialization. You're rewarding, basically the beginning of capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? Jefferson did not agree with the idea of America as an industrialized capitalist state. He wanted it to remain a land of small farmers, economically independent, all pretty much equal. Where if you got ahead, it was because you did something.
Yeah, about a sweat of your brow.
Absolutely, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But then there's the flip side, right? So that's his policy, his rhetoric. This guy was like rumpled most of his life, and he didn't really like things that were fashionable. He didn't really like excess. He didn't really like luxury, except that when he goes to France, he loves that luxury,
he
right?
loves him some ladies too.
He loves those ladies, right? So, but that was while in France. That was not appropriate for the American character. That was not the way that Americans were supposed to act, and certainly not the way you were supposed to act in America.
Right.
Right. Because there is a egalitarianism that luxury is the antithesis of, that just you would not be able to do in America. Right. So this is a guy, he becomes president of the United States. One of his very first action is to significantly shrink the size of the federal government.
Yeah.
Within a month of Jefferson becoming president, the federal government had a grand total of 125 non-military employees. That was it.
Wasn't that like 400 just in the Treasury Department when Hamilton was a part of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez.
Right? Because, but again, think about that, right? If your focus is going to be on encouraging industrialization and the complexification of the American economy, that's going to require a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Right? The easiest way to stop that was to get rid of the people who were doing it, which is what Jefferson wanted to do. So, he got rid of all those people, right?
Yep.
I mean, he reduced the White House staff to one guy. I mean,
Jeez.
but this was, and in a lot of ways, because Jefferson, the private individual, was very different person from Jefferson, the public individual.
Yeah.
And even though that meant Jefferson, the private individual, didn't get what he wanted, upholding that idea of Jefferson, the public individual, who was about simplicity and that sort of traditional American ideology of pulling yourself up by your bootstrap and et cetera,
Yeah.
right? He basically executed that vision
Yeah.
in public. But then you get to something like Louisiana Purchase,
Right.
Which our Constitution doesn't even really provide a way to negotiate that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, what do you do? Do you write a bill in Congress
Right.
about a secret negotiation? Like, that doesn't really work, right?
Because it's not. This seems like the most simplistic, idiotic thing to say at this point, but this is not America today, where that happens every minute.
Right? No.
Yeah. This is. I mean, he took. And to me, that was just one of those things that when I sent you that text, and was like, that motherfucker contradicted himself.
Oh yeah,
like,
no,
but,
he did.
But he was the ultimate, they're, France is going, they're having a revolution. We're backing that. That's the best thing ever, even though they're doing some pretty fucked up shit. But we're going to back them because they're taking down a monarch just like we took down a monarch.
Yep.
We don't have a monarch. I just made a decision to spend a lot of money to buy this land. But that's not a monarchy. I'm just old Uncle Thomas.
But yeah, but the thing is, in that particular moment, and a lot of this probably has to do with the worry about the Hamiltonian vision of America, really. Jefferson thought that by buying the Louisiana Purchase, by buying the Louisiana Territory, that he could ensure that there was enough land for individual smallholding farmers for, I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was something, he said something like 300 generations.
Gotcha.
I mean, he really thought that was like the thing that was going to seal the deal on America always being a place where a man could be economically free.
Gotcha.
Because he would have access to land.
Okay.
And that overtook all of his other concerns about the way that government should function.
Yeah. Well, he made the right decision.
No doubt.
I'm definitely not arguing that he made a bad decision. That was obviously that's one of the best presidential decisions of all time.
Right.
Double the size of your country with nothing. I mean, the amount of money that it took to do, was it 13.99 million or something? Like, it was basically 14 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was $1 an acre, I think is what it worked out to be,
Yeah.
which is insane.
Oh, yeah.
That was insane then.
It's kind of like what happened with Alaska in the beginning. Like, weren't they selling Alaska for like 3 cents an acre?
Yeah, it was something insane. Of course, most of it's useless,
Yeah.
but whatever, it's fine.
But it's got oil,
It's
damn
fine.
it.
Yeah, we didn't really know that, but that's cool. It worked out well.
But yeah, I mean, that's always been just kind of that moment. It was just like, okay, and I mean, every president does that in some way, shape, or form. But it was just one of those, like, I get it. Great decision. Perfect. Not exactly what you preached.
Well, and I think that's one of the problems with Jefferson. And there's other presidents that we could point to where that was the case, where their personal political philosophy has become so important to who they are.
Yeah.
That, and it has been built without the requirements of governing.
Explain that.
So it's easy to have ideas when you're not faced with a choice between A and B.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
You can profess all you want that this is the way that we should do things and this is not, and blah, 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 blah. But when you actually have to make a decision, when you have to choose between shit decision A and shit decision B, and neither really conform to your ideal because the world just doesn't conform to ideals, especially when you're talking about government, then you have a bunch of problems, right? Then you get into situations where you are contradicting yourself. And the people who have tried, the people who have held on to their political philosophy against all else, we always think of as bad presidents. Herbert Hoover did exactly what Herbert Hoover said he was going to do. And he has been remembered as a terrible president. Yeah. Be it he didn't change. He didn't waver on his belief in how America should operate.
Right.
Jimmy Carter did exactly what Jimmy Carter said he was going to do. And everybody ended up hating it, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, there has to be some degree of pragmatism.
So you're saying you would have loved to see Ron Paul as president just to see him deal with, like, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, in some way, right? Like,
he would have been my choice, but at the same time, like, you're not going to get all of that done.
Good luck making that work, right? And, Paul Ryan is a good example of somebody who spoke a big game, right? And then he got himself forced into some weird situations because of Trump.
Yep.
And he didn't come out the person he said he was.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We could debate whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's pretty undeniable he doesn't come out on the other end who he said he was going into it.
Right.
Lindsey Graham is in a similar situation right now, right? Lindsey Graham, like, I don't know if Trump has a video of him with a hooker in Vegas or what's going on.
Maybe in Pittsburgh.
But maybe in Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh might be more his style. But he... he's a good example of this, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody who has long professed certain things and now suddenly those things don't seem to matter very much.
Yeah.
Because he's being forced to compromise some things about his worldview. Yeah. Right? And we can say that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think a lot of times it just sort of depends on how that ends up playing out.
Yeah. So when you look at the founding fathers, who do you look to and just say, like, I would never want you to come back? Because I think, like,
John Hancock.
I was wondering if you thought that about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a miserable, horrible human being.
When we went to Boston, they like a huge part of that tour is about John Hancock.
Mm-hmm.
It's Samuel Adams,
Yeah.
John Hancock, and Paul Revere. That's pretty
Yeah.
much the tour that we were talking about.
Right.
And I was like, I'd never really heard that much. I knew from the Washington book that he thought he was going to be the president of the Constitutional Convention.
Yeah.
I knew, and from just, I'm sure everything in history, because it's one of the most famous stories about the Declaration of Independence. It's like he wrote his signature so big that the
Right.
king could put
Yeah.
it on without his spectacles. But I'm listening to this, and I was like, that guy sounds like the most prickish,
Totally.
douchiest.
Yeah.
Like, if you
Yeah.
can put it into words, it's like he thinks like his tombstone. Have you seen it?
No.
It looks like a giant dick.
Yeah, I'm sure
It
does.
really does.
Well, that's appropriate.
Yeah, even like she kind of put us in an area where we couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And so she's like, you'll kind of know which one's John Hancock's. We turned. It's
see
like,
it,
oh my
oh.
God.
It's a gigantic penis.
It really is, yeah.
to make up for his tiny penis in real life. Yeah, the founding fathers kind of break out into two groups. You have one group of people that are really inspired by philosophy, who sort of, have this Lockean idea of the world and democracy and these things. And then you have the other half who are kind of like basically, England's made it really difficult for me to continue with the shady, profitable business I've run for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
John Hancock is the leader of that crew of people. I don't think this is true, but I have often heard it said that Hancock said that the problem with the British was they made it so hard to steal. And because he had been working, against this very insular economic system that the British required of their colonies.
Yeah.
Which, is not real great for economic activity. There's a lot of things we could say about it that are negative, but basically his problem was that he wanted to be able to trade with who he wanted to be able to trade with.
Yeah.
And that's not the way that an empire works.
Yeah.
So you overthrow the empire, like, okay, sure, dude. I mean, he didn't seem to have any sort of philosophy. I mean, it was like literally like, I need molasses. I'm going to get it from French colonies in the Caribbean.
Yep.
I'm going to send it to South Carolina where it's going to be made into rum, and that's what's going to keep me rich.
Yeah. Well, and it was family money, but it wasn't his mom and dad. It was like his uncle.
Yeah.
And his uncle and his aunt couldn't have kids, so he
basically inherited.
Yeah, he was the one.
Yep.
He was the one sibling.
Yeah.
And he got all the wealth.
Yep. Absolutely. Isn't that great?
Yeah. And he didn't even have to go through like Washington's thing where he had to see like 12 people die in his family for it to happen.
Right.
It's like he just like a couple of people, he was good.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But that's one of the one of the truly ironic things about the American Revolution, and this is really only true of the American Revolution, is that the people who are in charge at the beginning are the people who are in charge at the end.
Yeah. Yep.
That just doesn't happen. Right? So that is part of what makes our revolution so sort of awkward, and why a lot of times we sort of balk at the idea of helping other countries that have a revolutionary sentiment, because we don't really do violent, uppy, downy sort of revolutions, because that's just not what we did here.
Right.
The guys who were in charge just wanted to make sure they were in charge.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that book on Washington, he talks about, some of the letters that he sent to his like aides in Britain, who he'd send like, okay, so I want this carriage to be made and sent over. I want these clothes to be made and sent over. And within 5 years, they had like doubled or tripled their prices, and Washington didn't know how to not spend money.
Right.
Like, it wasn't that he was like he didn't make a ton because he just didn't have the greatest land in the world.
Right.
But he also spent more than anybody in America outside of probably John Hancock.
Right.
But he was sending them messages like, this is bullshit, basically. It's like,
it costs what?
Yeah, that company probably had a lot to do with us revolting against the British, because they just kept charging him more and more money because they could.
Yeah, well, we have never done well as a country with economic reality, and that's true of the founding fathers as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's interesting to me the different, like, I guess from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War to some of the more, I guess, modern wars that we've had. I don't want to call this a war. This is just an occupation. What we're going through right now.
I'm not really sure what it is at this point.
But it's amazing to me that the Revolutionary War were the small fish against the big fish, and the big fish just didn't seem like they
just kind of gave up.
Yeah, like fuck it, we don't want to send all of our troops over there.
No,
and then in the Civil War, and we talked about this last time, but it was like we just won. The North won because they had more people.
Yeah,
like,
basically.
Yeah,
more people and more factories.
Yeah, I need 30,000 more people and more guns.
You could do that.
Done. Cool. Yeah. Go over there and get shot, but make sure that you get further.
Yeah, try to take out one of theirs before you get taken out.
Yeah, and maybe this is, this is probably a very American comment, but it is interesting to me that we have, throughout our history, like, from the Revolutionary War, and then there's always, like, the footnote of 1812. Like, Revolutionary War happened, and then 1812.
Right.
It is what it is. But from the Revolutionary War, there's, like, this period of near calm where nobody remembers those presidents. James Madison, yeah. Who was the next one? It was Monroe, kind of the last founding father.
Historians literally call that the era of good feelings.
Yeah, because you just think it was awesome.
Because it was everything was pretty tranquil.
Yeah,
Other than
some people still had slaves, some didn't. Yeah, right. Everything was cool.
Everything was cool. There was also one political party that helped.
Oh,
the Democratic Republican Party. Yeah.
Am I wrong? And the Whigs came later.
Later.
Then? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's such an old sounding name that it's like Democratic Republican. Like everybody was getting along. For
right.
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It was a quarter of a century.
Yeah. 25 years of one party rule. That never happens in America.
No. It is an interesting thing. How do we end up going with John Quincy Adams at the end of Monroe?
Oh, well,
because the Adamses are kind of known as like, they're kind of weird. We want you for 4 years and then get the fuck out of here.
They're difficult too.
Yeah.
They're like, they're a lot to take, I think. John Quincy Adams had been Secretary of State for Monroe. He actually wrote the Monroe Doctrine. That's his idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So,
I like that doctrine.
He's like a pretty, he is an intellectual heavyweight.
Yeah.
But that campaign that happens in 1824, the first one between him and Jackson, is probably the most knocked down, drag out fight in all of American history.
Is that what they called Jackson's wife, like a whore?
Jackson's wife was a prostitute. They accused JQA of being a kid diddler. I mean, there's it gets ugly. We don't even really know what ugly looks like. Even the ugliness Trump has introduced to our political rhetoric is like nothing compared to what happened in 1824 and 1828 during the rematch. So, but Quincy Adams doesn't actually win that election. I don't know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Jackson wins the most of the popular vote. Jackson also wins the most of the Electoral College, but he doesn't win enough to win.
Oh.
So this is like one of those weird things. So neither one of them was actually supposed to win the presidency that year. They ran for president, but everybody knew that this guy named John Crawford was going to win. John Crawford, I think he was a senator from Virginia. He was very, very well liked by everybody, very well respected. He'd been a statesman for a long time, really like well thought of by everybody.
Yeah.
He was sort of a consensus candidate. A few months before the election happens, he has a stroke, and it doesn't kill him, but it leaves him pretty jacked up. So he still wins a quarter of the vote, right?
Oh my God.
And then there's a couple other smaller candidates who are running around, but basically it's a three-way split between Jackson, Adams, and Crawford. Jackson wins the most of the popular vote. Jackson wins the most of the Electoral College. The guy who comes in fourth, though, is a guy named Henry Clay. And Henry Clay was sort of an interesting character. He is the Speaker of the House of Representatives at that time, who now, because there is no majority within the Electoral College, has to pick who will be president of the United States. Henry Clay was undeniably popular among the members of Congress, and he would have been the person that they picked. However, they were restricted to only pick among the top three candidates, and he came in fourth. So he makes a deal with Adams.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, this is not, you can't prove this, right? But it's pretty well known, he made a deal. And so Adams becomes president of the United States. The stepping stone to being president at this point was not to be vice president, it was to be Secretary of State. So Henry Clay becomes Secretary of State. Oh, shit. And that's what pretty much guarantees that Jackson's going to win the next election, because everybody in America knows that something is up.
Yeah.
And people are pissed off about it.
Well, yeah.
Right. So in the next election, Jackson just absolutely stomps Adams into the ground.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Andrew Jackson is always a very popular person to both, like, revere and have absolute hatred for.
Yeah.
I watched a documentary on him, and it was very interesting because he was kind of like something like the old oak or something like that.
Old hickory.
That's right. Different tree. It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Old oak is what he called that. But yeah, I was reading about him or watching this documentary about him, and they pretty much said, like, he was just a knockdown, drag-out guy, but he was kind of emotional, I guess.
Yeah.
He was very, like, I'm tough as nails, and I'll do anything I can, and then I'll just be the biggest baby in the world.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely. Yeah, he's kind of a mess of a human being in a lot of ways.
Basically took out the Bank of the United States because he was, like, angry at something they said.
Yeah. I mean, more or less. Yeah. Although he, until we get deeper into American history, there is still within the Democratic Party this idea, that Jeffersonian idea of that independent homesteader, right? And that's very much what Jackson believed in.
Gotcha.
And so the second Bank of the United States is pulled from that Hamiltonian vision of America. Mm-hmm. And so that's just not going to fly with him.
Gotcha. And
so, he really saw it as picking economic winners and losers, like a lot of people do with the Hamiltonian vision of America. Yeah. And he didn't like that. But to go back, there's an interesting story. He has an interesting connection with Missouri, which is that at the time that he is the senator from Tennessee, the young congressman from Missouri is see, I'm like screwing up left and right here today. I can't remember anything.
It's all good.
The painter, but not the painter, his grandfather, the famous Kansas City painter, whose name is...
You're not going to get it from me.
Oh, my God. You're killing me, dude. You're killing me.
Look it up on your phone.
I'm gonna Google this really quick.
It's all good.
But anyway, so this guy, whose name I will remember here in a moment, he is a young congressman from from Missouri, and he gets into a bar fight with some other people. And one of the people in the fight is Jackson.
Oh.
And
smart.
He shoots Jackson in the elbow.
Yeah.
And the bullet gets stuck in his elbow. And Jackson would apparently play with it from time to time as he was president. Like in meetings, he would like run this thing. And then Jackson, in response to getting shot, because he was on top of him, shoots him in the elbow. Jackson stabs him several times in the lungs. He ends up Thomas Hart Benton. Thomas Hart Benton.
Okay.
The grandfather.
Yep.
Not the painter. So he stabs him a couple times in the chest. And Thomas Hart Benton, the rest of his life, would have breathing problems as a result of this bar fight. They ended up becoming close friends. Weird.
This is why, like, our sex is weird.
Oh, yeah.
Men can
no,
get in
totally.
a fight and be friends.
Yeah. Actually, that's probably the primary outcome if you don't kill each other.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like you get bullied in school, and then you get in a fight, like, once you're older, and you're just like, okay, we hashed it out. It's fine.
Yeah, no, it's totally cool.
Yeah.
We resolved it. We punched each other into oblivion, and now we're good.
Because we're morons.
That's right. I shot you. You stabbed me in the chest.
Yeah, I have breathing problems. You play with the bullet. It's all good.
Life is great.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. Like, in the 2016 election, there were so many things that you hear, and I think you probably hear these often, but it was just so apparent in this last election because, I mean, mainly because you had Trump and you have super PACs and you can just say whatever you want. But I was always amazed when people would say that, like, Trump's war on the press is the worst in American history. It's like, have you met John Adams?
Yeah, no.
This is the, this election's the worst dogfight we've ever seen. It's like, I remember Andrew Jackson he might have something to say about that.
Yeah.
So and it was just interesting, like, they always say, like, this election is the most important in American history. It's like, one, maybe,
Kind of
probably
depends
not.
on what happens
Yeah.
over 4 years.
So we'll have to see.
So far, it hasn't really been all that important.
Not at all. But it's just a very interesting thing to me that we always are like, what's going on in my life is the worst.
Right.
So,
yeah, this election was interesting because, I mean, certainly I think Donald Trump getting elected was not good for our nation. But we're gonna survive.
yeah.
This isn't the worst.
No.
Dumber people have held the office. More racist people have held the office.
Without question.
Without question, right?
Yeah.
It is different in that media is different. So now we know every dumb shit thing that he does.
Yeah.
Which with past presidents, you could, like, their dumb shit stuff would often just kind of go unnoticed.
Right. Unless it's like Bay of Pigs, and you're like,
Right. Yeah,
Don't do that.
That was not smart. Right, but that's so there's, in a lot of ways we're just sort of overreacting to Trump, and actually probably the best thing we could do to Trump would be to start ignoring him.
Yeah.
Because he feeds off of the attention, negative and positive.
I feel like if you ignored him, though, things might start getting real crazy.
Well, yeah, because he's going to demand that attention.
Yeah.
From you, but sometimes, there are two things that I will give Trump. One is negative, one is positive. I'll start with the positive thing because I think it's the only positive thing that I can say about the man. Unlike every other president of the United States, this man really second guesses the idea of killing people.
Yeah.
He does not take that lightly, which is weird because I kind of thought that he'd be the kind of person who would revel in that.
Right.
But he really seems to have a problem with that possibility.
Yep.
He talks a big game, but the things he does
Don't reflect it.
don't reflect that at all.
Yeah.
Which is kind of refreshing in some ways.
Right.
But I like a person who will kill some people to protect my ability to consume. So I don't know that I agree, but it is interesting to me that as big a prick as he is, he really, really does not want to take a life.
Yeah.
Unless it's like children in cages. I mean, that's different. But
it's weird.
That's like 18 steps removed from him. I think things that directly would be responsible for, I think that's when he sort of really second guesses it and mulls it over.
Yeah. The kids in cages thing is a very strange thing.
That's super weird
and
to me.
I tell Nikki this, it's like I really need to research that more. Like I should. It's not going to do the world any good if I do, outside of just the general knowledge that I knew more about something. But it's obviously awful. Nobody's doubting that. There's no positive spin you can put on it. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. But it was one of those things where I was just looking at it and I'm going, how, like, everybody's saying he's racist, he's horrible, he's this, he's that. It's like, I really do want to know how far away that is from his desk. Like, is that something that he was like?
No, I'm sure it's way, way, way far.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was somebody, way on down the line who just
like, throw some kids in warehouses.
Was put in this shitty situation and not knowing what to do with kids, and then made that decision.
I have kids and I have $12 to figure out what to do.
Right, which doesn't mean it's okay, and doesn't mean that Trump
Exactly.
isn't ultimately responsible for it.
Yeah.
But
buck stops here.
I have, for me, I have it every time I see that on TV. I think in the back of my mind, I just say, "Well, we wouldn't really do that, so this must not be true."
Right.
Even though I can clearly, there's Chuck
Shows
Schumer looking at it, so
Yeah.
it's true. But so I think in my mind, I'm just sort of default. But so the first positive thing I could say is he doesn't want to kill people, right? The other thing that I will say about him that is a negative is that it's something he does very well, but it is negative, is that he, I think, understands what he's doing enough to understand how to use his craziness to get him out of trouble. So, you know, it is really, really interesting to me that he goes and picks a fight with 4 pretty backbench members of Congress who he wouldn't pay any attention to at all, except one of them's hot. And
AOC, just clarifying.
Yeah, AOC. Oh, Ilhan Omar, not bad either. But you know, he goes and picks a fight with these pretty inconsequential members of Congress. In the same week that the discussion is about, like, well, what did he know about his friend who is a raging pedophile?
Yeah.
Right? Now we're not talking about his friend and his raging pedophile. Nope. We're talking about 4 backbench members of Congress who really don't matter.
Yep.
And, you know, so it is pretty masterful the way that he is able to capture the narrative.
Yeah.
And even though the way he captures it is largely negative in the eyes of most Americans, he does it in a way that's positive in his base.
Yeah.
So, like, he is in that interesting, precarious situation where I suspect he'll probably lose the next presidential election.
All depends on what the Democrats.
Well, I mean, it does. Yeah. Nobody steals victory steals defeat from the jaws of victory, quite like the Democratic Party. But, you know, he'll probably lose. But among the people who actually vote for him, he will have like a 100% approval rating.
Yep.
And that just doesn't happen. That's weird, right? So we've gotten into this sort of weird space, but a lot of it is because he is so competent at changing the narrative to what he wants it to be, even if that new something is largely viewed as negative.
Yeah. Well, and I bring this example up because there have been times where he'll nail it, and not in a way that you might agree with, but he'll absolutely do something that it's like, and gonna put that on my record because I can say I just destroyed it. But I think I talked about this last time when you were here, or at the other house. But the his with was it the representatives of NATO when he was just calling them out?
Oh yeah, right.
It's like, and all of a sudden you have got, you know, even though Angela Merkel went back to Germany and was like, that dude is crazy.
Oh yeah.
At the
they
time,
sent a check.
Yeah. Oh heck yeah. They started, you know, increasing their military budget. So it's, you know, he didn't. But the thing was, he didn't understand it. At least what he was saying.
Yeah, he didn't understand it at all.
But they did. I mean, they basically said like, yeah, within 5 years we'll be there.
Yeah.
Yes, within here we'll do that. So it was just very like he uses that thing that, you know, his bully pulpit and Twitter to kind of affect a weird amount of change. And like, what was there was another one I was thinking of that and then the whole thing with Mexico where he just went, we're going to charge you a tariff unless you fix this.
Yeah, right.
And you know that it's because we have a bigger hammer than them.
Right.
They're like, what are we going to do? Like, we're going to either get worse or we're just going to deal with this problem.
Right.
So, like, he tried to do it with China, and that's not working because they don't care.
They don't care.
But with Mexico, they're like, oh, yeah, just, you know, go to war with our biggest trading partner that provides us everything.
Right.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think we'll just bend to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so, again, whether you agree, disagree, whatever, it's just strange that it's like, you know, he's just like, remember when I did that?
Yeah. I think it's one of those every once in a while, even a blind squirrel gets a nut sort of things. You know, like every once in a while he bumbles onto something that's actually legit.
Yeah.
The NATO one is like the greatest. I mean, like every president of the United States has struggled with that since Kennedy, right?
Yeah.
But he finally was like, I'm going to just bumble some stuff and, you know, not be incoherent, but talk about this nonstop until you do something about it.
Yeah.
So there are some places where it's definitely worked out, but I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it's not a part of any sort of larger policy strategy.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to sort of point to his ability to even be successful in a consistent way because it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, Japan and Russia are not calling him to negotiate a treaty. Like
no, you know, and it's kind of like it's the thing with China, for example, right? Like, you know, there's a reason why no American president in the last 20 years has taken this on. Mm-hmm. They fund our national debt.
Yep.
Right. Do you want them to keep funding our national debt? Yes, you do, because you don't actually want to make those difficult policy decisions about what you're not going to spend money on.
Yeah.
So you need them, and
Mhm.
you're just going to kind of ignore some of the stuff that they do.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's sort of the danger with playing this game with China is that, you can push them a little bit, but eventually, if you push too hard, they're just going to stop buying treasury bonds, and then
Mhm.
we've got some real problems.
Yeah. Well, I think it might have been watching John Oliver, but he was talking about one of the individuals in the State Department was making a comment regarding China and how they're talking to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said the United States, when they go to like a G8 or a G20, they're bringing 18 people.
Mm-hmm.
China's bringing hundreds,
Mm-hmm.
like 200 people to have every meeting possible to talk
Mhm.
about ports, to talk about trade,
Yeah.
and we're bringing 18.
Yeah.
That's probably a bad thing.
China, unlike us at the moment, and they have a lot of things that play into their hands on this.
Yep.
They have a very clear vision for the world
Yeah.
and their role in the world.
Yeah, what's that plan called?
The Belt and something system, Belt
Yep.
and Roads. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But, they have an idea,
Oh, yeah.
and they're executing their idea.
And they've got the money for the idea.
And they got the money for the idea, right? And people are interested in the idea,
Mhm.
and we don't really have an idea.
No.
Right. And part of that is that China is in a place that we aren't anymore, where
Mhm.
China is willing to, oh, yeah, we'll build ports in Africa. No problem. We'll invest that money because we
Mhm.
know it'll be our ships that are flowing in there. We'll control the majority of the economic activity. No problem. Where, in America, you wanted to have a conversation about building a port in Africa, and people are going to freak out about spending money. We shouldn't be spending money outside of America. Like,
Yeah.
well,
Oh, we are.
you got to spend money to make money.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah. So China is able to have conversations at this point that we're not.
Yeah. Well, and that, not that I agree with it at all, but like that probably does help that they have that nice cohesive unit, and Xi Jinping is
Oh,
putting everybody
absolutely.
in prison that he possibly can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But he looks like Winnie the Pooh, so it's cool.
Exactly.
Plus, he lived for a year
Don't
in
get me
Iowa.
bombed, bro. Don't get me shot. I didn't say it. I don't want to go to jail. I can never go to Beijing now.
Let's see. Sorry. Sorry I screwed that up for you.
I was planning on it next summer. It's number, I think, 4,000 on my list of places.
Oh,
wanna
yeah.
go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's definitely top on the places I don't. Yeah. Let's see. There was one other question. I keep thinking about it, and then I lose it. Correct me on this, because I've always heard that it was. I saw an article this week, and it just made me laugh. I have always heard that I think it was Benjamin Harrison was our first gay president. Is that correct?
Oh.
And I feel like I'm wrong on that. Like somebody
yeah,
else.
it would have been, well, these
It's
things-
all rumors,
These
but
things are all rumors,
Yeah.
right? So before Harrison, a little bit before Harrison was Buchanan. Buchanan was probably gay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just interesting historical facts,
Yeah.
theories.
It's muddied. It's muddied.
Yeah,
There's some historians who have thought maybe Roosevelt was gay. Teddy.
Yeah,
Maybe Teddy was gay. Maybe that's what was this expression of masculinity was about, right?
Yeah.
So that could have been a possibility.
Well, there's the whole like Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln sleeping in beds with dudes, which was not uncommon at the time, but he seemed to miss it a little bit more than
Yeah.
you might because, you know.
Well, it was interesting. Like that must have been a weird, like, conversation that the first person who thought of that had, because it's like, well, Mary Todd was a little crazy.
Right.
Maybe he was just like, that's fine.
This seems less crazy.
This seems less crazy. Yeah. Well, I think if I'm not right on this, tell me. But Mary Todd was a little touched, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was probably bipolar
Oh, okay.
at the least.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if not having some other things going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, fun fact: Sally Field and who's the guy that played him? Now my brain's not working. The actor that played Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, in the last movie about Lincoln?
He's the guy from Last of the Mohicans.
Yeah.
Why can I not remember that guy's name?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis. There you go.
Just came to me.
So here's a fun fact. Daniel Day-Lewis and Sally Field are both method actors.
Right.
Can you imagine how depressing that set must have been?
Must have been very depressing.
Like,
I sort of imagine that Daniel Day-Lewis walks around in a like cloud of depression, and it impacts everybody who ever comes into contact with him.
yeah.
Except for when he was doing Gangs of New York, because Bill the Butcher was definitely not depressed.
No, Bill the Butcher he was having a good time.
Yeah, he was having a very good time.
Yeah. Yeah, he I remember a few years ago I heard an interview and they were like, yeah, Day-Lewis is in Paris right now learning to be a cobbler, so pretty sure his next movie is going to be somebody in the fashion industry, and sure as shit, like 3 years later.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, I can't imagine, man. That'd be walking around on set acting like Mary Todd Lincoln or Abraham Lincoln.
That'd be so exhausting.
I'd want to punch him in the face.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to be mean. I would want to punch both of them in the face.
That would just be a little much.
Yeah.
I think we need to go back to the 1920s where everybody was just doing the same version of over-the-top acting.
Do you think the 1920s and 80s really had that? Do you think they had more in common than we like to give credit for? Because when you just said that, my immediate thought was they were doing a lot. And it's like they were boozing it up, going crazy. And then in the 80s, it was just pure cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, it was, in a lot of ways,
financially pretty good times.
It was similar. I mean, one of the interesting things about the modern human is we seem to react to the same economic conditions in the same ways over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot to compare it to. But, actually, you might compare it more to...
You're going to tell me, like, the 1680s were pretty fucking
No,
awesome. That was a lit party.
The 1620s. The Tulip Depression.
Oh, Jesus
that
Christ.
was a thing, by the way.
Oh, my God.
Maybe more like the 1880s, because it's kind of like the beginning of a new Gilded Age, right?
Yeah.
Is the 1980s.
Well,
that we're still sort of in, right? Well, like we haven't really quite figured out what we're doing with our economy that's blowing up and developing quicker than we can figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of social problems and not a lot of will to fix the social problems, or even ideas on how to fix the social problems.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can be compared to there.
Yeah. Well, when you've got Rockefeller basically running the entire world show in any generation, you're going to have a great time.
Yeah. It's automatically going to be awesome.
Have you read Titan or anything on him?
A little bit, but I haven't read Titan, but I've read some stuff about him,
Trudeau, I guess, wasn't even going to take that book. He basically was just like, no. He's a terrible human.
Boring.
There's no way.
Yeah.
And he really was. Like, he was a very interesting dude, but what I realized reading that book was he had a great idea, built a business, and then, like, he wasn't the terrible person that history has kind of made him out to be. He was just kind of like, if you want to do that, cool.
Yeah.
But I mean,
he hired some pretty terrible people.
He hired some very terrible people, to be terrible for him. But he was a Southern Baptist. He can't be terrible.
That's all right.
And when you're talking about people getting together in large groups and making decisions, I was like, evangelicals are good at that.
Yeah.
But no, reading that book, it was just really strange to listen to it because he was just constantly moving. That was that was what he did. But he just seemed like a really boring person that created one of the largest companies the world's ever seen.
Well, it's like Henry Ford is like the same, where it's like constant movement but kind of boring.
He did not like the Jews
and terrible.
Yeah,
but a lot of times it was him hiring people to be terrible on his behalf. He was only terrible to Jews directly.
No, you can't do that.
They would hire people to handle the other terribleness.
Yeah,
but it's pretty interesting.
Awesome. Well, I know you got to head out, man.
Yeah, I've got to get to my sick dog.
Well, thanks for coming back on. Pretty much any time you're just like, I've got some time, I want to go drink beer.
Sure.
Please come over.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I like the free beer.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yep. See if I can put this on pause. Dude, what is going on?